and welcome to this special edition of In-Depth School and Community. As I mentioned yesterday, we're going to do a show every day this week. We're in uncharted territory. As you all know, the governor has issued a declaration of state of emergency, and therefore our schools will be down until April 3rd at the earliest. That may even go longer, we don't know. And so we're in a position where we have to try and come up with organized educational plans for all of our students K through 12. Now, yesterday we talked about the formative process of pulling all this together. Now I think with the help of our principals and staff, we're in a position to actually give you an overview of the kinds of things we're looking to do with our students. So let me first introduce our distinguished panel. First, Mike Reardon is principal of the high school.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome. Next is Chris Gallo, who's principal of Krista McAuliffe School.
Hello.
And rounding out our distinguished panel is Ms. Paulette Fitzgerald, who's the principal of Runlet Middle School.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure. Now, Mike, talk to me, because you mentioned this morning, and I think it was a really good point. You said, holy cow, I can't believe how many people came in to help us out this morning.
Well, I wasn't, actually you said that. I wasn't surprised that people were there. I came in concerned that getting everyone up to speed on Google Classroom was going to be a feat in itself. That once we presented the parameters of the type of work that we expected to get done for the kids by next Monday might be an issue. And none of that was.
Right.
I talked to the faculty just on the overhead at the beginning of the day, kind of laid things out. Then I walked around to the different departments, and everybody, and this has nothing to do with me. I'm just walking around and looking at what they're doing, and everybody was hitting on all cylinders. It was more a matter of kind of holding them back because we wanted them to focus next week on remediation and enrichment as the kids got up to speed on online learning.
Sure.
And they're just chomping at the bit. So I was very impressed with their work.
Yeah, that's great, and we'll get back to some of the specifics of what you guys are doing. But let's move over to Chris. Now we're kind of switching to the elementary side. So talk to us about, the attitude and the spontaneity, if you will, of your faculty and what you guys had to do.
Yeah, we had a full staff at school today, and we sat at safe distances apart from each other and had a full meeting.
Yeah.
And that went for about an hour, 15, hour, 20 minutes, and then we broke into a special ed meeting to talk with special educators and ed assistants about how to best support students during this time. And meanwhile, grade levels went off and did their planning, and then special educators and educational assistants assigned themselves to different students within those grade levels to help develop those specific plans.
That's great. We'll get back to the organization in a minute. Paulette, talk to us about how things are going at the middle school today and some of the things you guys had to encounter.
Yeah, things are going really well. We had sort of anticipated this might be coming. So last week our tech integrator and her assistant were able to make sure you get a count of Chromebooks and all of those details, things like that. So we were able to work out a tentative schedule that we are suggesting that kids follow. So teachers are already pretty familiar with Google Classroom, so they were diving right in. I know we'll get to specifics later, but some of the things that we were also working on were updating our website and things like that, making sure links are up.
No, that's great. And what's interesting, you mentioned the technology, and I know Mike's going to talk about some of that too, but now, Chris, you're in a unique position in that not all your kids can do the technology.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that.
Yeah, we are one-to-one, but we thought we need to put ourselves in the place of our parents and what they would be able to do and do well at home. And we took a lot of technology out of the equation. It's pretty tough to supervise kids in a school setting where we're actively supervising all the time to ensure that they're always in the right place on their technology. And so we took a lot of that off the plate of the parents.
I see.
Yeah.
Now, Mike, in your case, though, you're almost 100% technologically driven?
Pretty much, yeah. The technology, Frank, of it is, in retrospect, after we got through the day, is not the issue. The issue was different disciplines, different subjects have different needs. Like in the art department, for example, when I talked to them, they said what we really need to do is to get our kids' art projects that they're working on back to them so they can keep doing the work.
Right.
Phys ed said, we have to look at more theory now than obviously actually doing things because we're not with the kids. The core academics like science and English and so forth is a very different deal. I mean, they're really leaping into the middle of what's going on. Trying to restrain them a little bit about let's take a few days to get up to speed with for the kids, but they just want to go forward. Very comfortable with the technology.
So speaking of getting up to speed, and obviously you're going to be sending a note out to the parents if you haven't already done so, about what the overview of this plan is going to look like. So are you expecting your students to be able to jump on, if you will, the platforms as early as Wednesday or Thursday?
Yeah, a lot of the stuff's being posted already.
Wow.
The deadline, just so, and I'm sure my colleagues are doing exactly the same thing. I'm sending a memo to parents today, kind of laying out what the expectations are for their students. Each course is going to have for each week 4 posts, by which we mean 4 exercises of varying length and complexity the kids will be working on that feed into a more complex assignment. It's kind of like the formative and the summative idea. Once we get into it, we get beyond next week, I think we're going to be doing some pretty rigorous work online, which will, I think, serve us even better down the line because it'll be another option for kids to learn and access things.
Yeah, Leah Willingham from the newspaper was here today, and she was doing a story on what the various schools are doing, and I overheard her conversation with Tim Herbert, and I think one of the comments that Tim made was like, well, you know what, some of the stuff that we're doing now is like, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So we said, oh my God, this is great. So we're gonna continue to do that going forward. So sort of the landscape has changed, and as we've tried to gear things up to meet the needs that we have in front of us, we're discovering different things that we never thought of that could be really great educational opportunities for our students. So I think folks will see somewhat of a shift, a paradigm shift, if you will, in terms of how schools operate because of this. Maybe even the whole issue of snow days will go away because now you've gone through 3 weeks of snow days, if you will, and you're in a position to be able to provide quality educational opportunity for all your students at any given point in time. So I think the snow day issue may be a thing of the past. We'll have to wait and see.
But it probably bears pointing out when we start talking about this stuff that never in any way, shape, or form will being in an online class take the place of a classroom experience.
Yeah.
Just there's no way that richness can be duplicated.
Yeah, hold that thought. That's a really, really important thought. And we'll get back to you on that. And what I want to get back to is the whole issue of, as you know, many of the colleges have gone to online courses. It's very inexpensive for them, and it's a lot easier for people like Paulette and me to be able to access that. But we'll get to that point in a second. I want to go back to you, Chris, if we could, and talk to us again about how your staff was able to pull all this together.
It was quite a process that morphed throughout the day.
I'll bet.
Grade levels worked together and pulled together general learning plans. One for this week and one for the first week, one for the second week of learning. And then special educators and interventionists helped at the student level in terms of, well, I don't think this student can access general curriculum, so we're going to write a plan with modifications and accommodations. And it was an all-team effort, and we came up with different options, one involving technology and one without, because we wanted parents to be able to make that decision themselves.
Oh, they have a choice.
Yeah.
Nice. You make it sound like it was just like it was humming all along.
It was.
Really?
People work together very, very well in our
Wow.
building already, and I think it was.
There wasn't a sense of frenetic pace about, oh my God, we got so much time, I can't get it done, I want to go to see Paulette, can she help me out?
No.
You didn't have any of that?
No, people
Wow.
were calm. I was
Really?
very, very impressed. Very
Is that the
strong
leadership of the
staff.
building?
Absolutely. I don't take any credit for my staff. They're amazing.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. Paulette, how was your experience?
It's been really interesting. I think at the middle school we're fortunate because we work in teams all the time. So, for example, within the 7th grade team, our 3 language arts teachers were able to get together, the 3 math, 3 science, social studies. So they're used to planning together all the time.
Sure.
So it kind of lended
was
itself
natural.
to this
It was
situation.
natural, sure.
Exactly, exactly. And so then the clusters, we have 3 clusters at each grade level. So then the clusters met for a while to make sure that they were assigning. I think the thing that we struggled with the most was the appropriate amount of work to assign. So, and that's kind of unknown. I think we have to get through it and survey the kids and parents and see where
That's
we're
an excellent point,
but-
because when Mike was talking about the rigor, and I was running through my head, I'm thinking, well, how rigorous is it really going to be? And I think some parents are probably thinking the same thing. Is this going to be like the worksheet? Here's like 10 worksheets, fill them out, or when we were in school was do exercise A, but only the even ones, and tomorrow we'll do the odd ones.
Right.
And I think what Mike's indicating is we don't want to do that. We want to have some actual learning opportunities that students can say, this was a great experience for me, and I was able to move from point A to point B as a result. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was just going to say, with classes like the upper level classes, calculus classes, advanced placement classes, 3rd and 4th year language classes, those kids are functioning on a level where you don't want to have a hiatus in engagement.
Right.
And you certainly don't want them to, nor would they accept doing something like worksheets.
Right.
They need to be challenged and pushed forward. And that's what our folks are really preparing to do right now.
Can you give us a little bit more illustration on the issue of the dynamics of a in-class learning opportunity versus the,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, if you're in a class with 25 other peers, especially if you're an adolescent,
Right.
every time you open your mouth, you are, every time you make a statement, ask a question, respond to someone else, you're putting yourself out there a little bit. And just that experience of testing out your ideas, testing out your willingness to think on your feet, to risk yourself, is a huge part of your education, aside from the quality of whatever it is that you're saying in your argument.
Right.
And you can say, well, you can do that online. You can have a conversation online, but you know what? That actual distance that you're sitting there with a computer. You're not sitting there with 20 faces looking at you. It's a whole different dynamic.
Yeah, you raise a good point now. Paulette and I were talking about the math program over at the middle school, and so she asked me to go up and visit some of the classes. And I'm watching 3 different teachers. Now, again, as an observer, you always kind of put yourself in the position of how would I teach the class if I were the teacher, issue 1. Issue 2 is how would I react if I was a student in the class? So what's my learning style going to be like in this particular class? And this goes to your point. You have 3 very, very different teachers in terms of how they present material and what the dynamic is like between them and the students. And so the beauty of that is that you're getting such a variety, and you're not going to get that in an online course. All you're going to get basically is whatever the computer gives you. Here you have that unknown, which is the personality and the dynamic of speech and how the speech is being delivered to you, and making sure, like if I'm talking to Chris, you want this situation where she says, he knows who I am, he cares about me, and he wants me to be successful. If I can generate that kind of a dynamic between me and her as a student, then there's all kinds of things that you can get across that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do in just a straight online typical course. But I mean, that was very instructive as we looked at that math program. And again, they're all very good, they're all very successful, but they were different.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Let's go back to you, Chris, if I could, for a second. So we got K through 5. Okay. What are you doing for kindergarten?
Oh, well, a lot of our little ones don't
Yeah.
have a lot of stamina.
Yeah.
And so we always
Like
find very
me.
creative, just like Mike. So we always find very creative ways to keep them energized. And so part of our plans will be finding ways to give them breaks, mindfulness activities.
Nice.
And so motor breaks, I think that'll be really important. So a note to families, just please make sure that you give kids breaks in between, because they fall apart when we don't. The farther you go up the grade levels, the more challenging the work tends to get, and the length of the work will be a little more lengthy, and it'll be a little more rigorous. But we're making sure that it's accessible to all kids.
That's great. So what you're saying is you've got a graduated program starting in K, going all the way up to 5, and it mirrors what you would normally do if school were in regular operation anyway.
Yeah, and our teachers are ready and excited to call kids throughout the week, especially for
that's
our
an
littlest
excellent point.
ones,
Yeah.
because 5-year-olds, if they don't see you, they don't know if you're okay. And that's
Right.
something that we're very cognizant of.
Yeah, well, you were talking to me about the advisory program and
Right.
being able to contact folks. Talk to us about that.
Right. So we have each teacher has an advisory with about 13 kids. So one of the things that we were discussing today was having advisors check in on their advisees once a week. Just, hey, checking in, how are you doing? Is there anything you need? For the same reason.
No, that's
just
great.
to
That's
check in.
great.
It's about caring. I mean, we teach the kids the academics, but we also care about the whole kid. So
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
So in both cases, and I'll get to Mike in a second, but in both cases, are you mirroring what you have in school, which is, what, 8 to 2:30 roughly? I mean, are you looking for 5-6 hours of...
No.
No. Okay, go ahead. Talk to me.
No, I don't think our kids have the stamina for that. I think
Sure.
we're just going to hit on the most essential parts of the curriculum, give them some creativity in how they respond
Yeah.
and how we want to assess what they're learning. But I don't think it's feasible to ask our parents
Sure.
to get through 5 or 6 hours.
So you see the parents as willing participants in this whole operation.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes,
That's really
I
great.
certainly hope so.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it's very easy for parents to say, look, I'm busy, or I have things to do, or I have to go to work, or what have you. And so the student is left to their own devices in terms of how they handle it. But this gives parents an opportunity to really be, hands-on, interacting with their child about how best to address. Now, parents, let's play this out a bit. Parents certainly can call you and say, gee, Chris, I was with my son last night and this and that, and I didn't quite understand. Can you help me out? And you would say, well, let's talk to Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so.
Yes, so parents will receive information about specific teachers' office hours. It'll be a total of 2 hours a day. And a parent can send a message, an email to a teacher at any point, but during 2 specific hours every day, they'll be responding to those communications and also making phone calls to kids to make sure they're doing okay.
Wow, so that you got that pretty well figured out. So if Paulette and I are parents, then we know to get Mike as our teacher, we know his office hours are, let's say, 11 to 1. And so we would know, and he'd give us an email address or a way for us to contact him. And so either one of us could be able to reach him and say, we're working with our child last night and A, B, and C happened, so how can you help us to navigate our way through that?
Yes.
That's really helpful because I think the natural thing that runs through the parent's mind is, what am I going to do if I don't get it?
I know.
Because don't forget, most of us are in that
Right.
boat,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so my knee-jerk reaction would be to call Paulette and say, well, you're the principal, help me to understand what's going on. And Paul's going to say, well, I can't do that, I got to go get the teacher. So having these very clear, discrete communication vehicles available to parents so they know how to reach the teacher and what those best times are, as opposed to trying to go helter-skelter.
Yes.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
and we're having office hours too for parents, but also for students. So if the students are working on a lesson and they're like, oh, I don't understand, then, and again, our teachers will be responding to emails through the day, but during their office hours, we have for 2 hours.
That's excellent.
That is when they know that they will get a response from the teacher. Another thing that we worked hard to do was to make sure the kids aren't on their screens all day. So in the
Good
schedule that
thinking.
we have
Yeah.
like a morning walk or activity,
Right.
and then academic time, and then creative time, and then some downtime too.
Sure.
Non-screen time, like
Sure.
read a book or something like that. So
That's great.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, Mike, in your case, it's not so much the parents that will be contacting, teachers will be the kids, I presume.
Yeah, there's 2, as with middle and elementary, we have 2 1-hour office hours for each teacher when a student can contact them to ask questions, clarification, whatever. We also have asked teachers for each lesson that they teach to do a 20 to 30-minute introduction in which
Podcast kind of thing?
yeah, in which they try to give a context, anticipate issues that kids might have, that type of thing, to kind of ease the kids into the work. So it's not really worrying about too much screen time because the kids are going to kind of watch that. They're going to get their work. And then they have to go and do the work. So they're not necessarily online doing that. they're doing the reading, they're doing the investigation, the analysis, whatever they're up to.
So play it out for me. So you're sending a note out to your parents saying, this is an overview of how the program's going to work over the next 3 or 4 weeks, roughly. Now, parents want to know, so like as Kylene, who's my English teacher, is she going to be contacting me? Is she going to be contacting parents? How's that work?
Well, Kylene or any teacher if there's an issue with a student engaging, doing the work, logging in, we've asked our teachers to let us know, let their Commons administrator know. So we're going to contact the family ourselves to make sure if there's an issue with maybe the Chromebook's not working, maybe the student's not working, but whatever it is, we want to identify it. Because the bottom line, very pragmatically, is that this 3 weeks minimum work is going to count.
Right. Good point.
So kids need to be engaged. They need to be doing what they need to do, and if they need help, reaching out in their office hours and getting whatever they need.
But you also raised another interesting point, and that is, so if Paulette is the student and you're the teacher, and there seems to be some problem in the dynamic, whatever it may be, there's an opportunity to get help or to seek guidance. So maybe she can contact the guidance counselor, maybe she can contact you. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say I wasn't even thinking about that, but I actually just put that in the letter we're sending home for high school parents, that our guidance services are going to be available as well.
Right.
That's
true. So if kids, whatever they might need, those folks are going to be available to try and meet those demands.
That's great. I mean, Chris, you're, as a parent, again, using Paulette and I as the example, so we get information from the building principal, and then it's like, okay, so now what do we do? And I think as Mike's illustrating here, there'll be direct contact by teachers. You will have the opportunity to reach out to guidance counselors or to other folks within the building that you're used to have that kind of contact and that understanding. So no one's going to be left to their wiles, so to speak.
Right.
I think that's the real issue, and that's what parents would probably be most concerned about. You gave us all the information, now it's sink or swim. And I think what you're all saying is, no, we're going to create opportunities for you to get a life preserver if you need one. If there are issues that come up that aren't working for you, we can do that. And it's not just simply picking up the phone and calling the principal and saying, hey, what do I do now?
Right.
I think it's important for parents to know, and I just thought of this too, is probably the majority of our communication with parents is via email.
Right.
That's still there.
Sure.
So any question, email the teacher, or of course us too, but our teachers have pretty good email communication with parents. That's not changing at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's important to get out.
No, that's a good point.
And that was a point of emphasis for us today too, Frank, of, you're not going to, the teachers aren't going to be in the building, but they need to be engaged with their email because that's going to be a line of communication that's vital, more so than ever.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, and you are going to see a lot of communication through the email service from parents and students, to teachers, to us. There'll be, there's going to be some bugs or kinks in this, I'm sure, as we go along, but I think as both Chris and Mike, as you both said, the first day has been extraordinary in terms of our ability to get so much done without a lot of, flies in the ointment, so to speak. That speaks to the quality and dedication of our staff, the willingness of folks to say, well, let me see if there's another way for us to figure that out. So I think people have really looked at this in a very serious, coherent fashion. What can I do to create a better mousetrap, if you will, so that I'm providing the best educational opportunity I can.
I would also give those same kudos to our families, the families of our kids. They've reached out, email after email, call after call. How can we help? What supplies do you need? We're going to drop off new supplies for you.
Peanut.
We recognize we need, our kids need more supplies than you probably have on hand. So we're helping out. And so thank you to our amazing parent community.
Speaking of supplies, thanks for bringing that up. So I know parents are looking at, I need to get back into my building to get A, B, and C. And so I think we want to let parents know that I think there's an email going out, but like for starting tomorrow's Wednesday at 8 a.m., let us know. Please come to the building, pick up whatever it is you need. Someone will be there to greet you. If you need to get into the building and go somewhere, someone will escort you to where you need to be. We're still going to have lunches and breakfasts available at every building every day. I think it's important to say that. I know that central office is working with some outside organizations to create dinners, meals, whatnots over the weekend. There'll also be some delivery points, and I believe Jack Dunn's figuring that out right now, where those delivery points will be for families who may not be able to get to the school for whatever reason. So I think that's important. And I think this came up in your building. What if parents say, look, I don't have glue sticks, I don't have pencils, paper, whatnot. So we want folks to know we will have that. And I've heard from community people have contacted us and said, I heard in Paulette's building they need, all these materials. I have a whole bunch of stuff. I'd be glad to donate, if you will. So I think you're going to see some folks come into the schools to offer, assistance in that regard. So we want families to feel comfortable about coming into the school. We want families to know that, as this is a work in progress. And so please feel free to contact teachers, principals, or superintendents about how things are playing out. And if there's ways for us to make it better, we're certainly going to try to do that.
And isn't it interesting that as we in the whole country face this crisis, how it brings everybody together and really brings out the best in us.
Yeah, Chris and I were having a conversation before the show started, and if you turn the clock back a couple years, let's look at Concord School District in large measure. And what do you have? You have a really dedicated, sincere staff who want to do the best they can on behalf of their kids. Then you look at the community. The community is a caring community. They don't look at the school and say, well, that's just what our kids have to do. No, the school is a living thing. It's a vibrant opportunity for their kids. They take pride and ownership in the school. They want to see the schools do well. And if the school reaches out to them and says, can you help us, they're there. And so I think that collectiveness, if you will, that collective conscience of the school and the community is really something to behold. And sometimes we lose sight of that, as Chris and I were talking about, when issues come up, whether it's something nationwide or even something, internally. And that sort of, clouds the really great stuff that goes on in our schools day in and day out. And I think, we don't want to lose sight of that. It's really a great thing about Concord, and, one of the reasons why I think all of us, feel so comfortable about working here and wanting to maintain, this kind of educational operation. It's really, really a great place to be. So I want to thank our distinguished guests. This has been great. And I want to let our folks know that we'll be doing a show every day. Tomorrow we'll be doing special education, and I think Chris had mentioned some of that. That's a tricky operation in terms of being remote. And so what can we do to try to bridge some of that gap? We're not going to have all the answers, I can guarantee you that. We have reached out to the Department of Education for some help and assistance. We'll be looking for other ways in which we can help those students out, and I'm sure we'll be contacting parents as well to see what kinds of special circumstances might be able to be arranged. And then Thursday and Friday we have 2 other shows. We're hoping to have the mayor and Tom Aspel and Jack Dunn talking about the combination of services or coordination of services between the city and the school system. I think that'll be important. And then our last show will be hopefully the Commissioner of Education, one of our school board chair or vice chair, and then someone from DHS, probably Jack Leone, who was the director of communications, just to talk about statewide where things are at and what we can kind of look forward to over the next week or two. So please stay tuned. We're trying to give you as much direct, cogent information as we possibly can about how all this is playing out. But I think if you heard from our 3 principals representing the various levels in our school system, we're just really pleased with how folks have come together to try and make this work. And we're actually ahead of schedule. We feel pretty confident we'll have things ready to go by Wednesday. So thank you, and stay tuned.